I think it is worth giving an update now. I think we've got a better sense of why, what was behind the administration's timing in the sense of the day. How the US administration, how the Trump administration, I think Antony is trying to frame this in a way that is already people are poking holes in. And they're trying to frame it in a way that they can circumvent the demands of the American Constitution and the role of Congress, which I know you think is dangerous, and we should get into that a little bit more. We have got the news that 3 American service members have been killed and others are seriously hurt in hospital. It's obviously a moving situation. There is also news coming out tonight, Anthony, that the Iranian foreign minister has reached out to his Omani counterpart. This is being recorded by Reuters, saying that the what is left of the Iranian regime wants to de-escalate. So let's see where that goes. But I think there's a lot of politics of this, and there's a lot of moving parts in this. And there is still the overriding question of what does the White House want from this, and what can they possibly get from this? Because I'm not hearing anybody, Anthony, that I'm talking to at the moment saying that there is much clarity about what kind of a regime takes place after this. We know now that the existing regime of the Islamic Republic, as we knew it a week ago, has been effectively decapitated. But we don't know what replaces it. We don't know whether the White House is going to really push for a total regime change, and what would that look like? Or, as Senator Tom Cotton has suggested today, a Republican who is close to Donald Trump, or are they prepared to deal with remnants of the old regime as they've done in Venezuela? And what would that even look like, given that this is a regime that has been organized and committed acts of terror for decades now and has been committed to the destruction of both Israel and the United States? So I don't even know what that would look like for America to start working with the remnants of this regime. But I think there are still, as we're recording this, there are still an awful lot of unanswered questions, and members of Congress have a lot of those unanswered questions, and they want to come back, and they want to, Democratic members of Congress in particular, want to have a say, because they're saying, look, America is at war now, and we have a process for dealing with this, and we have a constitution that demands our engagement in this, and you can't have a president who just goes rogue and launches an operation on this scale, saying this could last for a long time, without the involvement of other branches of government. So what are you thinking? I know that you've been writing about this, Anthony. What are you thinking about this tonight?
I want to step back. Trump is doing something very interesting, frankly, and no one's out talking about it. I've been listening to different podcasts and watching the television shows, and I'm going to try to describe to you what I think Trump is doing. And there's some actually smart people inside the Trump administration. We deride them often, but there's something going on here, and it's deeply cynical, Katty, but let me just phrase it for you and then get your reaction. So, the Trump administration has learned from Cheney, and they've learned from Bush, that if they're going to have military adventurism, they're not going to turn these things into democracies. But what they could do is, because these regimes are generally corrupt, they can outbid the bidders in the corruption. So let's go to Venezuela. We go to Delcy Rodriguez. You're running a corrupt regime. You got black market oil activities, black market drugs. We're going to bid you higher than that, and you're going to get American treasure and American opportunism in exchange for that. And we're going to keep your regime in place because you know how to control the system in Venezuela. And we're less interested in the George Bush, Condoleezza Rice democracy. We're more interested in you being on side with Donald Trump and the Americans. Let's fast forward to Iran now. They want to use that same strategy. So they decapitated the top. They probably killed 20 of them. I found it very odd that they thought that they could congregate together during the daytime, thinking, I guess, the Americans and the Israelis only attack at night. That was a weird thing.
Just to jump in, there is a theory there that Ayatollah Khamenei wanted to go. I mean, he's in his mid-80s. He actually wanted to go out in a blaze of glory. He realized the Americans were probably going to get him at this stage. And it was odd, like you say, Iran experts that I've heard have said that it is odd that he was there, but they think that this could even have been deliberate on his part.
But I want to go back to this decapitation strategy, and I want to make it adjacent to corruption. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to decapitate you guys. Trump called into the Atlantic magazine journalist this morning at 9:30, said, I'm ready to talk to you. We're ready to open up talks. And here are the talks, Katty. You ready? Hey, guys. you guys like money, we like money, and we're going to offer you a proposal to you run the country, dial down the radicalism, dial down the bullshit about taking out Israel. We'll give you lots of money. We'll let you get your oil back on the oil markets. We'll even help you with the Chinese. But we have to have some say, and we have to be in partnership with you on the corruption and in partnership with you on the totalitarianism. And so we can deride this. We can look at this in a very cynical way. But I think this is a brilliant strategy for Trump if you are Donald Trump. Now, if you're wincing in the car listening to this, or you're wincing on your hike listening to it, I'm sorry, but I just need to explain to people the thinking inside the administration. I'd like you to react to that. Do you think I'm right on it? Do you think I'm wrong on it? Directionally, what are your thoughts?
Look, so I wanted to do an update partly to be able to touch on what we kind of talked about at the end of our live stream on Saturday, which is, what if this works? What if this works in the context of what Donald Trump wants to get out of this? And it's interesting that we've been kind of thinking along the same lines over the course of the last day. I mean, I think there is a world in which moving the big figurehead like Maduro, like Ayatollah Khamenei, could give Trump domestically some political cover. I think he can say to the American people, we went in there, this was a massive shock and awe type military operation. We didn't put boots on the ground, although it's interesting listening to Trump allies on the Sunday shows today framing this very carefully, that we're not going to have a large scale American presence on the ground. So they're not ruling out presence on the ground. But I think if he could remove the top of the regime, as he has just done, and have a more Trump friendly kind of remnant of that regime, kind of Iranian Islamic Republic adjacent regime, if you like to call it that he feels he can work for, I think there is a way in which he can say this is a win for him. And I think there is a way, it's very interesting listening to Democrats today. They're being super careful about the way they talk. They're talking a lot about the process. And I do think it's important that there is a process that works in democracies. And you've written about this, and that there is a process for a reason. It is what makes democracies strong. And I think that is important. But I think it's interesting listening to Democrats. They're not coming out in full criticism of the act itself of decapitating the leadership, because they realize that there is a way that this could work out that is positive for the United States. Now, maybe Democrats hope that they can paint Trump as a king who circumvents democratic processes, who expands executive privilege. But if this leads to something that is more America friendly, even if it is in a kind of transactional, corrupt way that you're describing, I think that is something that is going to be hard for Democrats to run against. I think there is a way that Donald Trump can paint this as successful. Now, I don't think that means it's successful in a year's time, 2 years' time, 5 years' time, because there isn't much of a model in that region for a non-hereditary monarchy that is stable and close to the United States. I'm struggling to find the model for that maybe it's Syria. I don't know. Iraq is not particularly stable. The Gulf states are all hereditary monarchies. So I don't know that this works in the long term, Anthony. I don't know that this produces a regime that is more America, Western, Israel friendly in the long run. I just don't think we know the answer to that. But I think I do see a way in which Donald Trump can present this as a win to the American people. Hi, everybody. There's so much going on in the world at the moment. We would love you to subscribe so that we can carry on bringing you these podcasts and all of these live updates that we're doing in this crazy, fast-moving news environment that we're in. So please just hit that subscribe button. It really helps us.
Well, again, I'm not saying it's going to work. I'm just trying to present to you what they're doing. They're taking the Venezuela model and they're trying to export it into Iran. One of the things I'm going to recommend to people that listen to us and read our newsletter, and we'll attach this article from the New York Times over the weekend on Venezuela. The nightlife is returning to Venezuela and in Caracas, the club life, the restaurants, etc. And there seems to be a good symphony between the expats and the in-country elites in Venezuela to helping the working poor. And so if you notice, it seems to be working in Venezuela, and it's giving no political kickback or blowback to Donald Trump.
And that is obviously the model, and it's a different country with a different population and different links to the United States. But that is the model that they hope they can make work in Iran.
Listen, there's a lot going on here, Katty. So let's just talk about a number of things that are going on. The regime is grotesque on every level. It is definitely a terrorist exporting regime. You talk about Iraq. They've got lots of influence over the Iraqi government, much to the chagrin of the Americans in the West. They are no good, and we both know that. But the question about what we're doing and why we're doing it and whether or not it will be successful, no, I don't know. Ultimately, it will be the institutionalization of that regime. They killed 40 people maybe at the top, but after 50 years, is there enough sediment in their governmental procedures where somebody rises to the top and they keep the regime going? Because I can tell you, without a land invasion, without soldiers on the ground, the rebel causes inside the government are not well funded. They're relatively unarmed. The citizens that want to overthrow the regime,
not armed.
Yeah, and they've been more or less, from a terror point of view. And again, I don't know. The Iranian government saying 3,000 people died in the protests. The Americans are saying it could be over 100,000. And there's lots of disinformation, but there's enough information to know that they've done a very good job of repressing opposition in the country.
And they also had done a job. They had an org chart. They knew this was going to happen. They had got layers of succession planned in the event of exactly this sort of decapitation. Now, as you say, we don't know how deep it goes. We don't know. And the Americans actually don't have, I understand, very good intelligence into that org chart once you get down to the kind of 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th layer of seniority of the people that could do it. And we don't know how good they are.
Can you, for all of us, what is the political cost to Donald Trump, if anything? And can you please weave into that the Epstein situation? Because I guess I've become very cynical in my old age, but I do think that, man, if I want to get this Epstein stuff off of the front burner, dropping some bombs is a good way to do it.
So look, on the timing of this, I do think it's worth a couple of minutes on the timing of this. The administration is making the argument today through its proxies. You heard Congresswoman Luna, who's an ally of Donald Trump's, on the shows today saying the reason we had to do this now is because Iranian missiles in the southern belt of Iran were poised to attack American interests in the Persian Gulf, particularly the Fifth Fleet Base down in Bahrain and in Qatar as well. So that is the official line. And they're trying to push that one really hard because they want to have cover for an operation that actually was a war of choice. Now, the reporting that is coming out is that there wasn't any imminent threat. Whatever the administration says, there is not the intelligence that those missiles, which have been pointing at American assets for years, if not decades in the region, were actually poised to strike. Obviously, we talked about the nuclear program. The nuclear program was in a worse position than it was 6 months ago, and there was no evidence. My understanding is that there were people going to dig up the uranium that had been enriched and that had been buried after the strikes last summer. So the only plausible explanation that I've heard for the particular timing of this, the day, as opposed to the broader timing, and we can get to your Epstein point in a second, was that between the CIA and Mossad, they had this intelligence that these group of leaders were in that building, in the palace on Saturday morning and US time. And so they felt that was the right time to strike and that they could get all of them. That may be the case. I think it's worth putting all of that out there. You know, Saturday Night Live is having a lot of fun with this. The late night comedians are having a lot of fun with this, that this is a great distraction from all of the Epstein files, and what we are still to find out. And then what we reported about last week, which is that we know, and it's been widely reported, that the Department of Justice is under scrutiny for not releasing files in which there are accusations that Donald Trump abused a minor girl in the 1990s. That's just an accusation. We have to say we don't know whether that's true or not. We don't know the veracity of the interview. We don't know the plausibility of the interviews. We still haven't seen those files, but we know that those files were meant to be there and they haven't been released yet. And we also know that Donald Trump's approval ratings are very low, and he's going into a midterms in which Democrats could win the House and he'll be investigated. Otherwise, for the president who has spent the last 10, 20 years railing against regime change and forever wars, and as recently as the Venezuela attack said, what are we doing in the Middle East? That's 24-hour flight away. It doesn't make sense. From a point of view of timing, this doesn't make sense. So maybe you're right. Maybe it's just the distraction. In which case, people are dying, including American service members, for that distraction.
I mean, again, I think your points are excellent. I think that there's a couple things going on at the same time. And I think Trump is cornered. And I think to Netanyahu's credit, he used the cornering of Donald Trump to get him to flex.
MBS has been calling him, asking for this too. But that's not American interests. That's Israeli and Saudi interests.
But I also want to address for people who ask about, well, why would the Iranians send missiles into the Gulf states that didn't attack them? Like, why are they hitting hotels in Iran or residential buildings in Bahrain? And I think you guys have to know the answer to that. The answer is that in those countries, there are many expats. As an example, the population in the UAE could be 10 million people, Katty, but there's only 1 million of them are Emiratis. You know, it's one thing if you're French and you bomb France and it's World War II. The French are going to stay inside of France. But if you're bombing countries that are generally reliant on expatriates, there could be an expatriate migration. You know, people have said to me, wow, I saw Dubai as a safe haven. I saw it as a tax haven. I went there for a tax shelter. I'm now living in a bomb shelter. You know, it's a meme going around. But I think what the Iranians are trying to do is they're trying to tell you that, hey, we still get state-sponsored terrorism. And we still get the idea that we can strike fear in the hearts of your citizens, even though we ourselves are under attack. One other quick point, Katty, and I'd love you to address this. One thing Trump is letting the world know, and this is something the Americans have held back on, frankly, for 80 years, is that not only do we have the most powerful military in the world, and we probably have the best cyber capability, and we have probably the best robotic drone usage in the world, and we probably have the best sonar technology, and we probably have the best avoidance of radar technology, okay, with the stealth bombers, et cetera, that there's nobody close. And maybe I'm wrong about that, Katty, but I think there is nobody close. And it worries me because when that happens, when you have nobody close, the other teams get together and say, okay, we got to team up against this group of people because they're no longer acting with their military might with some level of benevolence. What is your reaction to that?
I'm struck by how cautious everybody is being in their response to this. We haven't heard very much from the Russians and the Chinese, which is sort of interesting given that Iran was a client of theirs and a provider of theirs. I think everybody's kind of waiting to see which way this falls out. But however it falls out, a lot of countries are going to be thinking, yeah, that we don't want to be in the side of being a small country alone. We need to gang up with other countries. We need to be part of a coalition against the US. I think that is a possibility. On that point about them sending missiles into the Gulf, there's a couple of interesting things I've heard today. One is that there's a randomness to the way they're sending these missiles that suggests a certain amount of disarray in the leadership or whoever it is that's organizing. Maybe these were preordained bombing sites, that they had before this attack, that they had already put into place. But there's also the fact that they've been striking Oman. There was a report that a missile went near Cyprus. It does look like that was a kind of a fire at a ship, not necessarily at Cyprus itself. But they're going after America's allies. This is a regime that is prepared to take enormous risks at the moment because they feel they haven't got much to lose. And so they're going to go after America's allies, try and draw America's allies into this to try and broaden the conflict and to show that they can strike. If you are close to the United States, you are vulnerable right now in the Middle East. I mean, I have a nephew who's living in Oman, in Muscat. He's lived there for a very long time. You know, it's a scary time to be a foreigner in the Gulf at the moment. So I think that's some of what's going on, and that we, I think, all have to hope that this doesn't escalate and that this doesn't result in a broader war, particularly that doesn't bring in, you know, the Saudis, because I think that would be the most catastrophic if that would happen. If there was a real attack on Saudi Arabia and this were to broaden, then I think then we are looking at a much bigger problem. And this is the problem with a war of choice, as America found out so much, right? We've spoken about this so many times, you and I. America found out in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Libya, things don't always turn out the way you think they're going to turn out. We have to make the case that this could work for Donald Trump, and there's a lot of people who are happy about seeing the Ayatollah deposed today. But there is a reason that you work with allies. There's a reason that you work within the processes of the United States as well.
I just want to add one last layer to the Iran discussion, and that is the Pope. And the Pope, Pope Leo, is out this morning denouncing the attacks, and obviously he's doing it in about as polite and as a diplomatic way as he can. But there's a problem here for J.D. Vance, and I just want to remind people I am a practicing Catholic, and probably the one Catholic who has been the most prominent convert to Catholicism in political life is J.D. Vance. And J.D. Vance has also lined himself up with the incredulist, if I'm pronouncing it right, wing of the Catholic Church, which is the wing that emphasizes deference to Rome. And so I just want you to hear me out for a second. The Pope is Pope Francis, no mas, does not like Donald Trump. Pope Leo, I'm really not in for this authoritarian stuff that's going on in my home country. I'm the first American Pope. And this is going to cause a problem for J.D. Vance because, you know, Katty, I can tell you about Catholics. The Pope still has that doctrine of infallibility for most practicing Catholics. And this is going to hurt Vance coming up into this potential 2028 election. And I think people need to know that. There's been a revealing tell here in Vance's relative silence on the critiques of these policies by the Pope. And don't underestimate that. If you're not a Catholic, you may not get this, but I'm just telling you that the Pope has a lot of power.
And Donald Trump has spent the day in the kind of weird kind of criminology of the White House and succession. Donald Trump has spent this weekend elevating Marco Rubio on his social media feed, which is interesting, also a Catholic, but not in the way that J.D. Vance with his conversion.
This is why I keep telling people he's going to kill both Vance and Rubio, because this is exactly what he would do to those people. And then 6 months from now, he'll be praising Vance and decapitating Rubio. That's what Trump will be doing.
We said earlier this weekend, this is against international law. I mean, there's no doubt about that. This administration thinks we don't care about international law. A lot of Americans may not care about international law, but to have somebody who has the stature of the Pope say this is not okay, I do think that could kind of make a difference as well. Okay, we're going to leave Iran there. This is going to be a developing story. Obviously, we'll come back as there are more developments during the course of the week. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you later in the week.